Hi, and welcome to Divorce Hacker. I'm your host, Ann Grant. On this show, we'll have a variety of guests who've been through divorce and are experts on the topic. Whether you're thinking about a divorce, in the midst of it, or already divorced, we are here to share our stories with you in the hope that you may relate, learn, process, and overcome whatever you're experiencing in your life. Welcome to another episode of Divorce Hacker. Today, I am in the hot seat, and my friend Michelle Gillette is interviewing me. Michelle, take it away.
Okay. So Ann Grant is an attorney, author, entrepreneur, a law professor, and a host of Divorce Hacker. And did not aspire to be a divorce attorney. In a prior lifetime, she was a corporate litigator, married to a corporate litigator with 3 children. But when her seemingly perfect 16-year marriage ended and she experienced a very high conflict divorce, she created a support group for women contemplating divorce. This experience was the impetus for Ann's best-selling book, The Divorce Hacker's Guide to Untying the Knot, which provides legal, financial, and psychological expertise to help the reader skillfully prepare and protect themselves as they navigate the modern divorce proactively, efficiently, resiliently. The rest is history. Manhattan Beach Family Law, founded by Ann, has grown exponentially and has offices in Manhattan Beach, Brentwood, and Newport Beach. Ann is excited to share with the viewers of Divorce Hacker what she's learned over the years representing hundreds of individuals. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, so why did you become a divorce attorney?
I, as you mentioned when you were doing your introduction, did not grow up thinking I would be a family law lawyer. In fact, as I was going through my very high conflict divorce, my pastor at the time looked at me and said, because I wasn't working, and he said, Ann, you're going to become a spiritual divorce lawyer. And I looked at him and I said, there is no way in hell I'm going to do that. I wanted nothing to do with family law as I was going through my own very high conflict divorce. But I was called to do this, Michelle. I had been a corporate litigator working at a very large international law firm, as was my ex-husband. And we went through what can only be described as just a horrific divorce, partly because, or largely because we were both trained litigators. We were in court about every 6 weeks for 5 years.
Wow.
And it was just a battle. And the children suffered greatly. We have 3 children. And so at the end of it, I wanted to help women. I started a support group. You mentioned that, not with the idea that I would be a family law attorney, but just wanting to give back. And through that process, one of the gals in the group asked me to represent her. And I was really able to be super effective because of my training in the courtroom, but largely because of my experience as a mom and as a wife. And so I realized that I could be really helpful. And then I wrote my book. And from that point, my practice just grew organically. So I feel really fortunate to be able to do what I love, which is to help other people move through this process.
Yeah, that sounds like the perfect alchemy for a great divorce attorney. And I love that you both wanted to out-litigate one another. or I don't love it because it's exactly what probably made you start this book. It's just all the acrimony.
Yes. So I'm a big believer in what's called the collaborative process. And this is where, and I'm trained in this manner of moving through divorce. And when we utilize this method, both the lawyers and the parties sign an agreement that they won't go to court. And so that immediately takes a lot of the angst and strum out of the process. It's usually about 40 to 50% less expensive, but most importantly, we can arrive at creative solutions without battling it out in a courtroom. And so when someone comes to me, I spend a fair amount of time talking with them to understand whether they're a good candidate for the collaborative divorce process, because I believe so strongly in it. And there's only really a few situations where I'll advise someone that I don't think it is a good idea. And that would be if in the collaborative process, everybody relies on each other being transparent and honest. So if someone, for some reason, whether it's a substance abuse issue or other issues where they can't show up and collaborate and be open and transparent and honest, then the process isn't going to work because I don't have the ability to conduct discovery, take depositions, issue subpoenas, or go to court, which would otherwise move the process along. But I have found that for the clients I represent that utilize the collaborative process, those typically are my happiest clients because they often can walk away and still maintain a relationship with their ex-spouse, and particularly where there's children involved and co-parenting is necessary, not just to the age of 18 when a child reaches the legal age of majority, but basically forever. This is a very effective way to engage in a co-parenting and collaborative process moving forward.
Yes, and I can vouch that you are accurate on all of those accounts. So you're divorced yourself and a divorce attorney. So what's your view on marriage now?
That is a really good question. So I was raised in a very religious family and taught from an early age that, I was going to get married, have a very traditional family. And actually, in this particular religion, you were married for time and all eternity. So it wasn't until death do you part. It was forever, like into the afterlife. So this was like ingrained in me. In fact, my first husband and I got married under these circumstances. And I looked at marriage as being a beyond lifetime commitment. And I was a big believer in it. In fact, I still am a believer in marriage. I think marriage is fantastic. I'm just opposed to staying in a bad marriage, which I will talk about at some point today. But in any event, having been through 2 divorces now myself, and this is now what I, spend all my time pretty much doing is dealing with people in this process. I have come to the conclusion, based on the evidence, that marriage is broken. We don't have a divorce problem. We have a marriage problem. So if you look at the history of marriage was created many, many, many years ago, hundreds of years ago by men. And the purpose of marriage was to preserve wealth and or align families. Okay, these are like medieval times, kind of is what we're talking about. And so marriage was not for the purpose of love, of protecting love, or love had nothing to do with it. Okay. So about 100 years ago, we began getting married when we fell in love. But I believe part of the problem with this is that when you take a structure that's been created for a singular purpose and you lay it on to a different set of facts, you're going to have problems. And this is demonstrated by the statistics. So over half of first marriages fail. It was 50%. After COVID, it's higher. About 63% of second marriages fail. And a whopping 79% of third-time marriages fail.
Wow.
So this idea that, half of marriages fail is inaccurate. It's a much higher number. I'm not a mathematician, but I'm sure somebody's able to do the math on that. And so, again, I think, we really need to be able to have these discussions about why is it not working? And one of the things that needs to be considered is this. We would never sign a lease for a car, sign a contract for an apartment, or enter into an employment agreement for the rest of our lives. We all understand that at some point we're going to want a new car. We're going to outgrow our apartment, and our boss may have issues and we can no longer work with them, right? So why would we enter into a contractual relationship that binds us with draconian effect if we don't stick to it for the rest of our life with an infallible human who, when we got married, we married our husbands. And, what you're attracted to when you're younger and when you first fall in love, those qualities, someone who's handsome and strong and all those things that, make our heart go pitter patter, are not necessarily the best qualities for a father to have or a provider. The qualities you need in the father of your children are quite different from the qualities that probably attracted you to them when you met them back in your 20s or your 30s. So there's a concept that's been floating around. I didn't create this idea, although I thought I did. I thought I came up with this, but I did the research and realized it's already been out there, called the Wed-Lease. Rather than wedlock, the Wed-Lease would create a situation where you could enter into an arrangement for a specified period of time, 3 years, 1 year, 7 years, a 7-year itch, and do a trial run. But the idea would be that there would be no draconian consequences if you decided not to stay married forever. So right now, a lot of people stay married even though they're miserable, because in the state of California, for example, it's a community property state. Immediately your wealth gets cut in half, like right out of the box.
Right.
And then there are also fairly substantial support requirements. So if you were to come into this Wed-Lease knowing that when you walked away, you were going to walk away with whatever you walked into the marriage with, without any of those other fringe benefits, it would incentivize both parties to be financially independent, which I actually think is a really important thing, especially for women, to not lose their marketable skills, because they, by doing that, give up their power. And a marriage, a lot of it is like, it's whenever you're in a relationship with two people, part of it is like there's a power dynamic. So it's a long answer to your question.
So how do you feel about people staying together for the kids?
I think it's a terrible idea. I grew up in a situation like that. I used to cry myself to sleep at night, wishing that my parents would divorce because it was such a miserable situation. I have a number of people who have hired me, women in particular, who have told me that they stayed married for the kids, and now they're ready to get divorced because the children have left for college. And without exception, in each of these instances, they have told me that they wish that they had not done that. And they often have found themselves tremendously disadvantaged, where they've stepped out of the workforce, they become financially dependent upon their husband, and here they are now with their children aging out, and husband's reaching retirement age, so he's not going to have to provide financial support forever. And they're really not in nearly as good of a position as they would have been in had they come to me sooner, and we'd address these issues sooner, so they could get on their feet financially and take care of themselves. And also the children don't benefit. Hands down, in these situations, these women who have come to me, sometimes they came to me earlier and decided to stay married for the kids till they aged out. And in every single situation, the children have major issues. So, the studies have shown that staying together for the children, if it's a bad marriage, is a bad idea. It's not good for the kids.
There was actually a study also about waiting until the kids go to college. I don't remember who did that study, you might know, but it indicated that that was not an optimal time.
Right.
Yeah. So I actually got divorced before my son left for college, so that we would have time together to process all of it, because the article was saying that when they go away to college, their whole life behind them is just completely disrupted. And so there's no coming home to what you knew. Everything's different. Their new environment's different. Their old environment is different. There's not time to adjust.
So that's a really good point. I actually personally had this experience as a young adult when I went away to college. And what you're describing is something that I lived. And I do think we both have children who are kind of in that place of having gone to college and coming home. And boy, they really, really, I think, need and thrive on coming home for the holidays, being in their home, feeling like they have that safe container.
Yeah.
And so if the parents have just split up and that's so disrupted, and, maybe the house is being sold in the midst of that, that's a really hard thing for a young adult to experience when in their 20s, in that place is such a formative, important time in their lives. And I know this from my young adults, and also, from, if you read the news, there's so many young people who are committing suicide and having serious depression. So a lot of it coming out of COVID. And yet I think we have to be so mindful that, their brain doesn't fully develop till they're 27.
Mm-hmm.
So, we sort of think that's why this idea of the age of majority being 18 when they're adults is a complete fallacy.
Mm-hmm.
They're not even anywhere near to being an adult. And adulting really, I think, until they get closer to that 26 or 27 year age mark, which is when they graduate from college, usually then they really are getting their first job and starting their adulting. And also that brain development has been shown to finally be in a place that's much more solidified.
Mm-hmm.
So to disrupt them when they're in a very sort of college is a challenging time.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just all frat parties and fun. It really is a challenging time for young adults. It's a really important thing to be mindful of.
Yeah. So 2-part question. What is the main reason that people come to you and say they want a divorce? And then when you get into the weeds, because that might be a blanket generic reason, but when you get into the weeds, what is actually the bigger reason or the more common reason when you get a little more detailed and further along?
So generally when people come in to see me, quite often it's because there's been infidelity.
Mm.
And that's sort of like the presenting issue. However, when we dig deeper, usually what will happen is, what I found is partners will overlook infidelity so long as they can rebuild trust, respect, and commitment. But the real defining factor that will end a marriage most often is what I'll call financial infidelity. So where there is an affair happening, I have a situation, which I'll change the names, but I want to use this as an example. So I have a client who lives in a very affluent section of LA. And she was aware that for a long period of time, her husband had rented a house right down the street in the same affluent neighborhood for his girlfriend. And all of her friends were advising her for a number of years that this was unacceptable and she needed to end her marriage. She chose not to, and I see this happen all the time. This is not an isolated incident. Like, I deal with this all day, every day long. Mm. So she was unwilling to end her marriage so long as she could maintain her lifestyle, which was very extravagant. Mm-hmm. But the minute that he started having some financial issues with his company, she was out. Mm. Then she, wanted me to file for divorce, immediately.
Yeah. And
this is an issue that's recurring. And I think it's something worth understanding, and it's really not okay. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're going to stay in a marriage and sort of be living a lie and assuming that you're going to be taken care of financially, you really have your head in the sand. Because more often than not, your spouse has other priorities and they're going to come to roost. Mm. And when they do, if you haven't been proactive and you're back on your heels in terms of like what's going on with your finances, mm-hmm. you are not going to fare well in this situation.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, so financial. So when somebody comes to you and they're separated and they're trying to reconcile or they're discussing the possibility of reconciliation, when do you right away know there's no chance, this is over?
So this is not something I created. This is something you're probably familiar with, the Gottmans. John Gottman and Julie Gottman, his wife, have done a great deal of work about communication styles. And they are so skilled at this that they're able to discern with a frightening degree of accuracy within a very short period of time whether a couple is going to get divorced or not. And so they rely upon what's called the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And so these are communication styles that spell disaster in any relationship, particularly a marriage. So the first horseman is criticism. And this is where, you're constant, not just once in a while being helpfully critical, but you're not conveying things in a positive way. You're sort of tearing down the character of the other individual. The second horseman is contempt. Contempt is the biggest destroyer of relationships. So this goes beyond criticism to, it shows up in cynicism, sarcasm, and just extreme dislike.
And it's a superiority.
It is a superiority. I'm better, I know better than you.
You chose that, really?
Yeah. And so it's like a sneering, eye-rolling, putting down sort of thing. So it's sort of like criticism on steroids. The next horseman is criticism, defensiveness. So defensiveness is terrible for relationships. And in its worst form, it can look like gaslighting. So defensiveness is where you're not taking responsibility, and also it can turn into shaming of the other person in order to detract attention away from maybe something that the individual has done wrong and they know it. So it's a tactic. And then the fourth horseman is stonewalling. So stonewalling results from being flooded emotionally, and the person just shuts down. So what you want to do if you're experiencing this in a relationship, according to the Gottmans, is take a 20-minute timeout. I mean, they've scientifically researched this and have concluded 20 minutes is the length of time that most humans need to regroup. And sort of restore themselves. And not just 20 minutes sitting in a chair, but walking in nature, doing some exercise, like something to sort of clear the air. So I think that John and Julie Gottman are really on to something, because certainly that's been my experience in working with couples, that by the time they end up in my office, often all 4 of the 4 horsemen are at work in their relationship, and they have not. And sometimes it's been happening for decades, and it's just past the point of repair.
Yeah. I love that John and Julie Gottman also have this advice to, first of all, like if somebody does take their 20 minutes and they're advised to come back and say, I'm going to need more time, and they can go back. It's not like you have to do it in 20 minutes. It's like you can come back out. So some people who have like a lot of old trauma that they're activated and they're not ready to be done in 20 minutes. They might have to come back and say, I am going to go back for 20 more minutes. And the other thing they said that was great was, can you put, if you need to go to bed with this unresolved, agree to touch your feet. And I thought that was cute to remember, I like you, or, because sometimes it's that. Sometimes it's just, I remember with my husband, just sometimes when I was married, I would hug him and I'd be like, oh, I should be doing this more. I forgot about this. Sometimes I think I might still be married if we hugged more. Sometimes you just forget to touch. Right?
Especially when you're mad.
When I'm mad. Yeah. When he's mad. Yeah.
There's no touching. There's no sex. That creates a whole separate set of other issues. Then, you've got the snowball effect. But I think it does. I think John and Julie Gottman are right. Those 4 horsemen is where, it starts.
Yeah.
And from there, it just, can snowball.
And you probably just see it. Check, 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 check.
I do.
Yeah. Right. So what do you think are the components of a healthy marriage? So let's turn it around the other direction.
I think respect, trust, and commitment. And so I believe that, even if there has been some breach of trust, If the parties can work together with a skilled therapist, for example, and work on rebuilding trust, respect is critical. I mean, once you lose, I remember being in this situation myself, and even before I was a family law attorney, but just like being in the weeds myself, thinking, I remember thinking very clearly, I no longer have trust or respect. It's over. But that's also what the research shows. And then the third thing is commitment. So a lot of times people will be in counseling. They'll suggest that there is, their words will say what needs to be said to attempt to placate the other person into believing that they can be trusted, respected, and that they're committed. And yet oftentimes their actions suggest otherwise. And so it's extremely important to see what people do rather than what they say. And I will send people away who come to me if I don't think that they're ready to get divorced for two reasons. One, it's the right thing. And two, it's the smart thing. One, it's the right thing because I'm not anti-marriage. I don't want to bust up marriages that can be saved. So I have a lengthy list of family therapists and couples counselors that I send them to see whether they can mend things. And it's the smart thing to do because I certainly don't want to take their money and start the divorce process if they're going to change their mind. So that's not how I'm interested in moving forward in the work that I do. But I do think you have to have those things, not just in word, but in deed, for a marriage to flourish, and particularly after there's been a breach of trust.
Yeah, I'm sure you see people and you're like, you see a little glimmer of hope, and you just think, oh, maybe they might come in and say, hey, we're growing apart. And you might say, okay, go see this therapist. It sounds like you're like, maybe if they just took more responsibility for themselves or got rid of resentment, or like where there's things that are treatable, like things that they can actually work on.
What I actually see more often is they'll come in and they'll get back together. And I had this experience in my own life, and I've watched it happen so many times. It's a pattern. So there's something to this where, especially when we have children, I think we really don't often, most of us don't want our marriages to end. That's not what we signed up for. And so some of us can be almost desperate to want to believe it's going to work. And so I've had many instances where I've observed people in marriage counseling, and the wives in particular sort of put their head in the sand, just hoping for the best. And then the shenanigans continue, and they're back in my office in 2 years. And that's why I suggested that you really have to watch what they do and be mindful. Because more often than not, the statistics on the number of marriages that actually survive when couples are in marriage counseling is very, very low.
Is it?
Yes. So while everybody thinks marriage counseling is the answer, usually the high percentage of those couples will end up getting divorced.
I see quite a few people going just to be like, well, we said we went, but they were ready. They were done.
Yes.
So what do you think about the sexless marriages? I hear a lot about that, and I'm sure you do too.
Well, what I've learned is that they are much more common than most of us would probably think. I've been astounded at the number of couples or individuals who come into my office and reveal that, they've been sleeping in separate bedrooms and haven't had sex in years. I am even more shocked. Well, I'm not shocked anymore. I used to be shocked at the women that would come in and were seemingly stunned to learn that their husband was having an affair when they hadn't had sex in 5 years. I just wanted to shake them because, men achieve intimacy through sex. I've talked to a lot of men through the course of doing this work. And, I'm there. I've told my prior corporate litigation partners that what I do now is so very different from what I did before, largely because probably about 15 to 20% of what I do is legal, but it's almost like being a counselor. So people will come to me, and it is relevant to understand what's going on in their marriage, of course, in order for me to represent them well. And I often learn that, as I said, their marriage there's been no intimacy for a number of years. But women really need to understand that men are not just hairy women. Like they really believe, and I think they do have sexual needs that if they're not being met, they're going to meet them. They're either going to do it through porn, or going to strip clubs, or they'll have a girlfriend or multiple girlfriends, but they will not be having sex. So if you think your husband is just not having, getting his needs met somehow, you are completely in denial. And I think more women need to understand this. And I think it's really challenging, having been a working mother. I, certainly with 3 young children and a demanding law job, and there was a lot of travel, there were a lot of times where I was not interested in anything other than sleeping. And I know this is true for many, many women. So it's really a big challenge to make sure everyone's husband and wife are getting their needs met. But if you don't do it, you will end up in my office or someone else's office who does what I do, probably. Or you'll stay married and just be roommates. I mean, there are plenty of people also who I see this happen often where there's a lot of financial resources. They will live as roommates. They will have their separate lives and sort of have an arrangement. So that is also a super common thing. Now, either the arrangement is, explicit and everybody knows what's going on. More often than not, it's implicit. And you have the situation I addressed earlier where often the wife kind of puts her head in the sand, her lifestyle is maintained, and husband has a completely separate life. And this is very, very, very common until there are financial issues, and then the wheels come off.
I remember my OBGYN talking to a group of women and saying, listen, after you have a baby, you're not going to want to. You're going to have babies crawling all over you, and your needs are going to be for affection, of physical touch, are going to be met already. And you're not going to have energy or desire, but start anyway. Eventually when you're here, start anyway. And sometimes just sexual responsiveness will put you in gear. Don't wait for you to be ready.
Right.
This is advice. This is, of course, saying not in some situation where I'm not going to talk about, abuse situation or really disliking. If you care and you love that person and you know that that's how they connect, you connect maybe verbally and they connect sexually. She's just saying, hey, just start. And then
I love that. And it's really important. I think the way to do it too, that can be effective, is you've got to, once you wean your babies, go away together. You have to take the trip, and it has to be a priority, and you have to do it a lot. So you're having candlelit dinner and you're feeling like you want to be intimate, and you're sharing those times together. Your children will be better for it. If you don't do it and invest in your relationship, if you don't put your relationship with your spouse first, and you allow yourself to get your physical and emotional needs met through your children, which is it's such a natural thing to do as a mom, but if you do that, your marriage will end, or you will be married and miserable. Those are the 2 options for that. That is not going to end well.
Yeah. There's also a mindset shift of maybe I'm not doing it for him because I'm mad at him. I'm not doing it for him. I'm doing it for me, for women, because some of it goes into their own shame or not feeling comfortable with enjoying sex or not feeling comfortable with their body. That there's a lot that a woman carries around often that makes them inhibited. And sometimes that's just doing work with, hey, reminding, hey, women can actually enjoy this too. And it's not really a chore for him. Go into it selfishly if you want, but do it.
Sex is the most amazing thing there is, really.
Yeah.
And, but also what happens is women, after they have children, just the whole biological process, you don't want to have sex. Like your body's telling you not to. Like you have all kinds of things happening. And so I think it's really important to like take that time away and reconnect. It's really critical.
And also time for yourself, because I remember hearing Esther Perel counsel two women who were in a relationship. It wasn't necessarily male, female. It was the person who has the children all over them.
Right.
And I was shocked by it. I thought, oh, this isn't just a male, female thing.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So it's about taking time for yourself. Go, whatever, take your bath, go do something that lets you get rest. That self-care, that kind of thing where,
yes,
because the woman's giving, listen, I'm making really blanket statements about male, female dynamics, but let's just say typical gender, typical definitions, that she's giving all day long with kids or at work and with kids. And, she needs to replenish before she's willing to give more. So that's actually back into the self-care thing and remembering, her own body. And
also getting in touch with your femininity and viewing it not as giving, but receiving is incredibly empowering. And so it's really a way to come back into your body that is so deeply healthy and nurturing for yourself. It's a gift to yourself, especially when you have young children that, you're nursing and they're hanging off of you and you're just giving. I mean, this is a way to, like you said, there's no better form of self-care than good sex. It's really a wonderful gift that a couple can share with each other. And it's really important to prioritize intimacy in a relationship, because if you don't, you can lose it really quickly and things can go south pretty fast. I've observed.
So I want to make sure we're not making it all the female's responsibility, right? I mean, so what advice do you have for men to help her get to the point of feeling more comfortable back in that role?
Patience,
and maybe not act out of entitlement. I would say, like, it's like not a good. That is not a good tactic.
No. And that's not going to work.
No, there's a lot of things. So I think the work that Esther, for anyone in this position, I would say, but who would you say for them? Terry Rio, Esther Perel.
Esther Perel is great. One of the things she talks about that I think is so helpful to understand is, and I can't remember which specific book it is. I think it's in her Mating in Captivity.
Right.
So she talked about this concept that in order for there to be attraction, there has to be distance.
Polarity.
So, right. Familiar, that saying, familiarity breeds contempt. You and I have talked about this, but if, you're with each other in the bathroom, watching each other go to the bathroom, acting like you're college roommates in your sweats together all the day, like too familiar. Pretty soon you're like a brother and sister team raising kids. And that is not conducive to good sex. It does the opposite.
Yeah.
So if you want to have intimacy, which I think many of us do because it's so wonderful, you have to create some distance and spark. You and I have talked about this in dating. Like, you have some good ideas on this that were sort of eye-opening for me, but that maybe you want to talk about. But I think she's right about that. Because remember, when you're first dating, what's really fun about it is you're getting dressed up and you're doing your hair, maybe your makeup, and you buy a new outfit. And so, but why do you do that? I think we do it thinking it's for the guy, but actually what it does is we feel like
sexier.
Yeah, our body. And we're getting connected with our sensual feminine, like the left side is the feminine side. So because we live now in sort of this, like, we're very, well, at least I am, being a lawyer, and many of women are now more and more like men were traditionally, right? More of those. So to get to access that femininity feels so fun and good.
Yeah.
And then it's attractive. Right. And then, the magic happens.
Right.
So what are your thoughts? Because I know we have talked about this.
Yeah.
And I feel like you're sort of a pro at this fast notion. And I think you have a lot to add.
I said at the notion and not just left it a pro.
Yeah.
Okay. So for one thing, I think is a good idea is to get ready separately. And, if you're going away for the weekend or you're, just maybe he goes down to the bar or even downstairs in your house, whatever, some separate, let her get ready. Let her have her time. Let her have her bath. Let her, just have that time to get ready without kids coming in. Like, give her some time. Maybe she needs to go, go to yoga class. I think yoga is so sensual. Like anything that's sensual, that would be one thing. And if you're at a hotel, you're away, then, go to the bar and let her come out. Because it's seeing somebody from afar. Sometimes it can, not up close all the time, but from afar, let her walk into the room. She's still probably, doing a lot of things to look good, but have you looked at her? Like, have you seen, see her through fresh eyes.
I love
that.
that.
And I think the other thing is Esther Perel will say, the seduction starts the minute you stopped having sex the last time, right? So when you're done, you're starting the next round of start saying nice things of for me, appreciation. I want to be seen and known, like that you appreciate me, my whole person, not just, I didn't like you all week, but it's Saturday, so that's not going to work.
Right.
So it's like, it starts with, am I seen? Am I appreciated? Am I adored? Like that kind of thing. And they want to know that too. They want to know that they're sexy and, whatever it is. People are different, but men want to know that they're appreciated for sure. I hear that a lot.
That's the number one thing.
They do not.
That is the number one.
Nobody wants to feel taken for granted.
They'll appreciate.
Yeah. There's a lot of lack of appreciation going on. And so I think that is important. And I think for sure, this has been like game changer for me. I feel so sexy when my body's in shape.
Yes.
And I didn't even start exercising regularly till I was 52. I was always active. I eat well. I'm really into longevity foods and all that. But like working out and going to yoga and those type of things were my time for me. It wasn't, I'm going to look good for you. It's like, how do I feel in my body? I love having some muscle tone and getting in touch with my body. So it's a mind body, having some practice, which is to me, again, is yoga, Pilates, walking on the beach, any of those things. Going to the batting teaches doesn't have to be all, some Zen thing. You could go whack the heck out of a ball and like get your energy out, but like get back into that. Great music, So there's a lot of things that we forget to do that marriage gets stale.
Right.
And so our dopamine, we need some dopamine.
That's right.
Of course, looking, male or female, there's a lot to look at, and
right.
So like maybe do the things that make you look at each other again. And then I would also say, if you are having sex to connect, then don't hop out of bed right away when you're done. Like stay there and cuddle, because that's a really great time to connect. Who knows what happens after that? No pressure or anything, but like that's a great time to cuddle. And really, if that's what you're there for, is like to connect, then connect and continue to connect and have that, a woman, spend some time with her and really love on her and be affectionate. Men are missing a huge opportunity in that aftermath glow of like, let it be really rewarding. If you didn't hop out of bed and you're done, some women will probably feel a little bit used by that. And like, wait, why did I believe all that about like, he was so charming until we're done now? Like, right. I feel like that's a big missed opportunity. I don't think enough people talk about it. And I think amazing things can happen in that little moment of intimacy that is just so bonding and beautiful and it's fun,
I agree.
So that would be the other thing.
That's good advice for everyone in particular.
Yeah. Okay. So now that we figured out how to save marriages, if somebody is not in the mode of saving their marriage and they want to get divorced, what is the best way to prepare for divorce?
They need to read my book.
For sure.
The whole first chapter in my book, Divorce Hacker's Guide to Untying the Knot, is about being prepared. And there's lists, like checklists in there of what to do, including like all the documents to collect. Because if you do that, you're going to save a lot of time and money. Lawyers charge by the hour, by the minute, actually.
Wow.
I mean, we run a timer when we're working on matters to figure out how much to charge our clients. So any documentation you can gather is going to be tremendously helpful, and it's all outlined in the book. It's also really important to do this in advance because once your spouse finds out you want to get divorced, a lot of times documentation will disappear. And certainly we can obtain it by issuing subpoenas and conducting discovery. But again, that's super expensive and time consuming. And a lot of it is easily available before the other person knows that, you filed and they've been served. So the whole first chapter goes into great detail about all the things that you can do to prepare.
And what are some of the things you should not do after the date of separation?
So I have had not as many now because I'm better at warning people, but I have seen instances where it seems like it's usually the women will go on a spending spree. And I think it's sort of like revenge shopping. I mean, I've seen crazy things where they've gone and bought like all new furniture for their house, which is sort of silly because the house is going to get sold and everything's going to be divided. But the problem with this is any debts incurred after the date of separation are separate debt. So that's all on him or her. You're not going to...
That would come out of her settlement, all the expenditures of the household.
That's right.
That she's not going to have room for in her new, smaller house.
That's right. So it's just not a good idea to do that. And likewise, any income earned after the date of separation is separate income. The date of separation, just so everyone is clear, is when one person declares they want to end the marriage, and then they act in accordance with that declaration. So
it means no more sex.
Yeah. I mean, I had an 11-day trial over the date of separation where, and it was a significant issue because assets, again, that are earned after the date of separation. So that means like any income generated by your retirement accounts, anything that's bought or earned after the date of separation is separate. So there was a situation where, one person was saying the date of separation was over here, and he was a super high wage earner, and she was saying, oh, no, the date of separation is here. And between here and there, they were traveling together and having sex. So, there was an 11-day trial taking testimony on this.
Wow.
Quite frankly, it's nonsense.
Yeah.
It's just not a good use of judicial resources or attorney's fees. But people, I think, don't understand that the date of separation is a really important kind of line in the sand under the law and for attorneys when they're, figuring out how things will be divided.
I know somebody who slipped up and slept with his wife one more time. And there's millions of dollars that happened to get earned in between the original date of separation to the next time when they had sex. And it was a very expensive little excursion, but it was worth it. I know. I was like, was it that good? As well. Was that?
Yeah.
Okay. So what are some of the red flags people should look for when they're getting married before they get married?
I would say the things that I see in my office that become problematic that probably maybe didn't seem like that big of a deal in the beginning would be tendencies towards substance abuse. That's really important to evaluate. I mean, having a good time is one thing, but if it's really going to become a problem, it will probably end your marriage. Anger management issues. Another one I've seen recently that I think is important to be mindful of is if someone's super codependent. So I think often if people come from a background where there was childhood neglect or abuse, that can lead to, not always, but occasionally or quite often, some of these tendencies to be overly codependent. And it's not something that all of these things can be addressed and professional help is available. But people really have to be willing to work on these things because it seems like as people age, whatever their idiosyncrasies or tendencies are get magnified. And certainly in a marriage where, you're buying property together and you both have a job and you're having children, like that's kind of like a pressure cooker. So these tendencies are the things that, when people end up in my office, oftentimes they'll say, oh, yeah, I saw this back when we were dating and didn't realize what a big problem it was going to become. So those are things to be looking out for. And then another thing that I would suggest is, I think in particular, and I think this is really changing now, but young women need to, because, they're the ones that bear children and it tends to pull them out of the workforce. And I certainly had that experience, but, it's really helpful, tremendously helpful to be financially independent. And maybe you can't earn at the rate you would if you didn't have children. And so, you have to step back a bit. But it's incredibly important to not find yourself without the ability to generate some of your own income, because otherwise it can put you at a real disadvantage if things do not work out.
Well, I think you are a wealth of knowledge, and your book is just a tool of wisdom. So I would recommend it to anybody. And I've loved this time together.
Thank you so much. This is really fun.
Wonderful. So it's called The Divorce Hacker's Guide to Untying the Knot. And I got to interview you on your show. Juicy stuff. Well, thanks so much for sharing, and thanks for letting me sit in your seat today.
It was my pleasure. Thanks. That was fun. Thanks for doing that for me.